how I managed to edge it. Which I'm surprised because I'm usually the one that gets sick.
And we're live. We're always a tail end of a conversation when YouTube actually decides to make us live.
Sorry.
That's okay. Not a problem. We're just discussing our illnesses. Well, we're not ill, but significant others, colds
Yes.
and whatnot. So yeah, and I polished my nails last night.
Oh, I saw the nice red color.
Yeah, I only did one coat last night because I knew I would have to redo, and I put flea treatment on the cats, and it started to like disintegrate my
Oh yeah, that stuff's
fingernails. It's like
nasty.
I can never, I just can't have nice things. I can't have nice
Can't have
nails.
nice things. Just can't.
But I'm gonna do another coat of it later, and hopefully I'll have beautiful red nails. We'll try
Luscious
anyway.
red nails.
Luscious red nails. We are gonna paint some Chinese well, I don't know if they're Chinese lanterns. I think they are. Just like a swag of lanterns here, and it's hard to see. I'll show you my my sketch. It's a little easier to see from the pattern that's available on my blog. So if you don't have this, you don't want to draw it, go ahead and right click on that, save it, print it, and then you'll have a drawing that you can transfer onto your paper. So that will make it a little bit easier for you, or even just an easier line drawing to trace. And on my blog, I have all the links to the photos. I'm using 2 reference photos for this, and like swatches, color swatches, and whatnot. So the colors we're going to use today are from Turner. But you can use whatever brand you want. I'm using my Turners again, and you can find those at our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com. I'm using quinacridone rose. I'm using permanent yellow, which is a very neutral yellow. It's kind of like a cad yellow medium, or a cad yellow, not quite a cad yellow light. It's not very lemony. It's kind of a very neutral yellow. Phthalo green, which is this kind of blue green here, and turquoise. And the reason I have turquoise instead of phthalo blue here is because it's not as intense of color, and it's a little bit easier to control without having to put tons of water. And we're actually going to work on a white background. So I'm going to try to keep our background. I know we're going to live dangerously, and I might not even splatter this one.
Whoa.
Oh, I know.
Whoa.
Shut the front door.
Shut the front door.
I hope Rich is watching.
I haven't seen him yet. That doesn't mean he's not.
So those, and I'm also using burnt umber because I tried mixing a brown and I wasn't that happy with the brown that I was mixing, because the turquoise isn't a very intense color. And I was using some turquoise in there, and I just didn't get a rich brown, so I decided to go with a burnt umber there. So we'll be mixing our colors from those 5. And we're just going to begin by doing some painting here. And if you want to find any of the products I'm using, just check out the video description. There are links, and there's more information on the blog post, just because I have a little more room to work over on my blog. So since we're working on a white background, we're not going to be working super duper wet. You may not want to use a really absorbent brush. So I'm going to show you the difference here, because I like to get a little bit more teaching in on these live streams so we have a little more time. I'm gonna grab my big box of watercolor brushes. I have a lot of watercolor brushes that I've amassed over the years. So like this, let's compare these two. Compare. This one's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit closer in size. So these bristles on these 2 brushes, and they are synthetic, but they're meant to mimic natural hair. They're very soft, and they have a snap, but they're more flexible. Now you'll find that brushes that are completely synthetic, that aren't trying to mimic natural hair, are much springier, and they don't hold as much water. So since we're working on the dry white background, we don't really need a brush that's going to hold tons of water. So I'm just going to grab a couple less absorbent brushes from my stash. This is an Ebony Splendor that's also available at Jerry's, and I want something that's a little bit larger. So I think I'll go with this Royal Langnickel Majestic. I really like that because it comes to a nice sharp point. And we're mostly going to work with rounds. If we get to the end and decide we want a background in there, or if you guys just really want to see a background, and you know, and I don't mind putting it in, because if it's perfect without a background, I'm leaving it. But if I feel like you know, you could use something else, then we could use a large flat to do our background. But we're going to start with these to begin with. And if you have any questions, go ahead, type them in all caps in the chat here on YouTube, and Sarah will ask them to me. So, do we have any questions yet?
Yes, I'm going back up where it was. Gracie Shack, can you recommend what kinds of water-soluble markers I could buy for my next week's painting party? I like the Spectrum Noirs, but do they do markers?
Yes, but they have Spectrum Aqua markers. The only downside to those markers is that I find the tips wear out fairly easily. So I would just be aware of that. I'm just putting my colors here close to the camera so you guys can see them on the palette. And I'm just going to sneak that turquoise over here next to the phthalo. And so I'm going from 2 reference photos just so I get kind of an interesting, I wanted a different shape lantern. The first reference photo I'm using is beautiful, but all the lanterns are very similar and I wanted a different shape. So I grabbed this one. And I think we should paint this one first because it is probably the easiest of all the shapes. So what we're going to do is actually wet the shape. Now, the paint is only going to go where the paper is wet. So just if you're careful to just wet inside your perimeter here, then your paint is going to stay where you want it. And now I am going to mix up a little bit of the quinacridone red and the permanent yellow here and get a nice orange. I think I'm going to need a little bit stronger of color. And then I'm just going to add that around the edges and let it kind of wick into the center. My daughter just joined us. Hi, Lila.
Hi. Hi, Lila.
Lila of Crafty Twins. And then I'm going to put a little bit of more of a yellowy mix here in the center just to make it look a little bit more illuminated. And hopefully, how does it look on your monitors? Does it look like it's dark,
I
fairly
paused
dark?
it. I'm not playing it. Should I be?
Well, if you could just kind of just peek at it for a second. I
Okay.
feel like on my monitor this looks a lot lighter than it is. This is a pretty
Let me see
dark color. I just want to let you know that in case it's looking a little light. And let me tip it so you don't have the glare. You can kind of see how dark the color is. And if you want your edges a little bit darker, go in and add just the
I'm getting to the part where you're
rose.
mixing.
Oh, if you hit the live button, it'll skip you right
Oh,
ahead.
you mean the big word live in all caps?
Yeah.
Are you concerned they look dark?
No, not dark enough. How do they look? Does it look pretty accurate?
Well, you're doing the second layer. It looks like it's darkening up.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because there's a delay. I forget.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to let that dry and we're going to skip over to this one. Just be careful not to rest your hand in that. I just thought that was a nice, easy one to kind of break in on. And this one over here is kind of like a light pink color. So I'm going to grab the quinacridone rose and I'm just going to add the water to it actually on my palette. So it's really, really faint. And I do have a little bit of that yellow in there. So it's not so like fluorescent of a pink. And I'm going to go in and glaze, just kind of do a thin wash over the lantern body and cap here. There is some fringe that we're going to paint on after, and more on the pattern I kind of pointed to some of the fringe so you would see what I meant. Now if you get any like leftover paint and it kind of puddles up, just pick it up, just dry your brush off on a paper towel and like so you just blot your brush off and just stick your brush in the puddle and you can pick it up. So this is very, very faint. It's almost like a shell pink color, but it's just quinacridone rose with a lot of water in it. And I just mixed it out on the palette instead of wetting the paper just so I'd have a little more control. And you could, honestly, you could do either way, just depending on the look you're going for. And just make sure to wipe up any puddles or you're going to get some unfortunate blooms.
Survey guy, Oregon. What are the winning lotto numbers going to be tomorrow?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many numbers are in a lotto.
4, 19, 36, 72.
All right.
I don't know.
Now, if that really does win, you're going to feel awfully bad.
Nah.
Nah.
I could play the lottery all the time and I'd never win, so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I never play the lottery.
I'm not a winner. I'm not a winner when it comes to that kind of stuff.
You probably are a winner because you're saving your money and not playing the lottery. And now over here, I'm taking that same color, but using it a little bit darker. Well, quite a bit darker, actually. And I'm painting this little cap area here. And I'm skipping down and I'm doing the upper part of the base of the body area. So since we're only using 5 colors, there's no way we're going to get colors that clash or are discordant because they all come from the same roots. When you see colors, when you see a painting that looks kind of amateurish, a lot of times it's because they've used way too many colors and you can tell nothing really matches, nothing really goes together. You might not really be able to tell exactly what's wrong with it, but usually that's what it is. It's just too many straight from the tube colors and not enough mixing.
Morgan Ward, do you have any tips to help keep my hand steady while painting?
Yes, I recommend that you get either something like um it could even be like a roll of paper towels or something like that. Lay it down on your table and rest your hand on it, or just roll up a couple socks or something so you have something to rest your hand on so you're just making small movements um with your wrist. It'll help you if you tremble.
Kevin Crespo, what economic artist watercolor brand do you recommend?
The Turners are great. Right now, they're like 75% off at Jerry's. So like some tubes, some colors are like 3.25 a tube. The ones that are like normally like either 50.99 or 12.99 or $3 um, and 25 cents a tube. So that's a really, and they have a tryout set. The set that I'm using right here, these colors, it doesn't come with a palette. You have to buy that separately. Um, there's these colors plus a white and a black, and it's $30. So they're smaller tubes than what they have on sale right now. But for trying it out, that's a good option. There's also Lucas. There's a studio. The Lucas Studio set is $12, and it's 12 colors, and it comes in a little case with a little case with a palette. It's just a tiny little kind of handheld travel kit, but it's got 12 half pans, and they use the same pigments as they do in the artist line, except they don't use the expensive ones. They use the cheaper pigments. So that's also a really good option. So I'm going to skip over to this one, and I am also going to be using some of that pink color. I think I'm going to add a little water to it. So it's kind of in between those two pinks. And I'm again going to do this top part here. And you can see just by adding water, look at the tone difference.
Katrina Noel, have you tried Winsor and Newton brushes? If so, how do you like them?
They're very good. I've used their acrylic brushes. I've used some of their watercolor brushes. They have the Cotman. I'm not crazy about the Cotman brushes actually. They're all right, but I think they're a little expensive for what they are. Um, I like their Winton brushes for acrylics and oils. Their Scepter Golds are nice, but they do contain some animal hair, so if you want to avoid animal hair, I don't recommend them. I think they're called Regency Gold. They're an acrylic brush, but they're fairly soft and they've got a good snap. And if you want some synthetic brushes for watercolor, I like those, and they work with acrylics really well too. So I'm just doing those little parts there because these sides are going to have like some design on them. Getting a little above part here. Yeah, pretty much anything you buy from Winsor Newton's going to be decent. They're good, reliable company.
Christina Weber, hi guys, how in the world do you keep your paint from beading up in your mixing area?
I honestly don't usually have a problem with my paint beading up. Um, I think some palettes have like a release on it. Maybe they had like a,
She just got a new palette, she
oh,
said.
you probably need to wash it with like some Dawn dish detergent. This is the Phthalo green, and Phthalo green is crazy intense, so I added some of the permanent yellow and some of the turquoise to it to um, kind of take down the intensity a little bit. And I'm just kind of working on dry paper and just trying to spread it out so that I don't end up with a puddle that's going to make a backwash or a bloom. A lot of people have been complaining about the paint beading on their palettes.
Gracie Shack, any advice on what project I can do next week's art class for kids, please?
I just posted a sun catcher tutorial, and it's very inexpensive to make, and it works really well with a big group of children.
Nancy Zappetto, do you like water brushes and for what applications?
I like them a lot, especially for travel. Probably mostly for travel because you got your water, it feeds out your water. You have to get used to it. It feeds out your water fairly evenly. So you have to remind yourself that your brush is going to keep getting wet as you're painting. So that can either be a hindrance or a help. Found it at first to be a hindrance, but then as I did more painting with them, I really enjoyed it. So just kind of keep that in mind. I like the Caran d'Ache ones. They're kind of expensive though. Niji ones are good. The best buy, I think, for the watercolor brushes though are the Primas, and you get like 2 rounds for $7 or 3 flats for $10. I prefer the rounds. All right, now that we've kind of got some on each lantern painted, we're gonna move back to this one over here, and we're gonna start to add some details. And I think I'm gonna start with a fringe, and I want a nice rich red. So this might be kind of funny, but I'm gonna use quinacridone rose. I'm gonna use some permanent yellow to kind of take the purple away. Because if you've ever, like, if you notice your printer, like printer ink, you'll have cyan, magenta, and yellow. So this is like a very magenta color. So it's not red, yellow, and blue that are the true primaries. It's actually cyan, yellow, and magenta. So I'm taking the magenta and just kicking it back with a little bit of the yellow. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt umber there to really make it richer. And since these are nice, high quality watercolors, you're not going to get muddy on me.
Bronwyn Wallace, what are your opinions on Reeves watercolor?
You know, I actually really like them for a beginner. They're made by Winsor Newton. Winsor Newton kind of took their name off the label, I've noticed in recent years, but yeah, I think they're a good beginner brand. Now, so if you were using Reeves and you were doing this, you may not want to mix your red because it might get a little more muddy. Because what it is the student grade paints have some fillers in them to make it more economical. Because when you're a beginner, a student, you're oftentimes wasting a lot of paint just mixing and not wasting. You're not wasting it. I don't want to that sounds negative, but you're using up a lot of paint just by mixing. So when they make the paints, they put a lot of filler in it, so it goes a lot further for you during those practice runs, but it makes mixing a little bit more problematic. So you might want to take your scarlet or your vermilion or whatever when you're doing that. I need a credit card scraper. Sorry about that, guys. Anyone have another question?
Well, I'm getting back up.
Gosh. Okay, got my credit card scraper. I'm just scraping in some details in the fringe here. With just the edge of my credit card scraper. I like it so much better than the beveled edges for really fine details because the ends will more like push the pigment around and give you a lighter area, and it's usually wider. So that's why I also like to have a little piece of cut up credit card or gift card handy for that. I'm gonna go up here and do the same thing. I think I'll make a nice bead of color along the top edge and just kind of drag it down. Got to mix up a little more though. So remember, we did the quinacridone rose, burnt umber to make it rich, and a little bit of permanent yellow to kind of kick out the purpliness of it. So I'm going to make a nice bead of color here, and then I'm going to drag it down. And feel free to resize that painting if you want to do it on a greeting card. Sarah had a good idea. She said that would make a really good greeting card for somebody.
It would.
You totally do this smaller. Just use a smaller brush.
Ange Aaron, I apologize, that was probably not pronounced correctly. How can you create aquamarine blue from just plain primary colors?
You're probably going to need your blue and water and a little bit of yellow. But cyan, like if you're doing a 3-color primary system instead of a split primary system, you would have a cyan as your blue, and that's very aqua based. It feels very aqua-y. Okay, now I want to do a little like motif on this thing, and this is dry, so I can. So I think I just want to not do anything too specific, but maybe just kind of put a few gushy flowers, and I'm going to use turquoise for that. Was there another question?
Yes. Bronwyn Wallace, how do you stop watercolor from cracking in the palette?
Add a little honey or glycerin to it. Generally, student grade paints will crack. I think it's because they don't have quite enough gum arabic in it or enough glycerin in it. So just by simply adding honey, which is actually a preservative and helps repel mold. You have to be careful if you live somewhere with a lot of ants or anything, though. You want to keep that palette sealed, but that will work really well. So just some blue blobs just to act like flowers. I'm going to grab a little bit of green. I don't want to use that phthalo quite on its own.
Kitty Cat, how do you get inspiration for what to watercolor?
I look at Paint My Photo a lot. I really like the I like seeing people's photographs from different parts of the world. I find that very inspiring. A lot of times I'll just take my paints with me. I try to go to as many beaches as I can during the summer, and then I just grab my paint set out and paint whenever I have 5 minutes. I don't even, I don't worry about how it's going to come out. You only have 5 minutes. You just start painting. You don't worry about painting well. You just try to get it done.
Yep. No, I don't know.
You don't?
I don't paint very much, so
I know you missed class.
I know. What was I just? Oh, because John has band practice and the girls all get together. So
Oh.
I have to like I'm usually at home making dinner because they start practice around 7 or 7:30. And I watched my husband try and make pudding today.
Oh, from scratch?
No, the box stuff where you just have to put the milk in. And he was reading the wrong directions. And then he didn't have enough milk. He's like, well, we'll just whatever. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna walk away.
Oh, guess what I cooked last night? That to rave reviews.
Chicken, beef.
Ribs.
No kidding. Get out of town.
I know. Well, see, Glenna was
Shut
going.
the front door.
I know. My neighbor was going on vacation, and she's like, I had thawed out some ribs, and they really have to be cooked like today or tomorrow. And I can't. She had like a 12-hour road trip. She's like, I can't
Right.
take these with me. I hate to throw them out. Do you want them? And I'm like, she was with Jason, want them? And I'm like, sure. Why not? We'll try that. And yeah, I followed a recipe on YouTube from the Bachelor on a Budget, and it came out perfect. It was like, man, it takes a long time. It was like 3.5 hours, 2.5 hours of time, but
Yes, good ribs do take a while.
they loved it. Even Jackson, who doesn't like ribs. I'm gonna make some
Ooh.
gray using some
Not Lila
phthalo.
though.
Not Lila.
Not
She's my
Lila.
vegetarian. Some phthalo green and some quinacridone rose, and they'll gray each other out. Make a really nice subtle gray. And you can see here, this is what you're gonna get right there: quinacridone rose and phthalo green. Oops, that's way too much. And that's why you sometimes buy mixed colors, because it can be problematic if you have to mix up a bunch of it and get it the same each time. So there we've got a nice gray. And I'm going to blot my brush because I've got a lot of moisture in there. And I'm just going to add some shading onto this because this is a kind of a white area. So I'm just adding a little bit of shading. And then I'm just going to spread it around with a wet brush. Yes, those ribs, they were very impressed. My husband goes, "How ironic. You're good at cooking ribs." And I'm not good at cooking anything really. So I was kind of bummed out that I wasn't good at cooking something that I would actually eat.
Right. Heather B. Do you really need special paper to blend alcohol markers, or does it have to be watercolor or special paper? Thank you.
You don't want to use watercolor paper for alcohol markers because it's going to suck up so much paint, so much ink that you'll run out of marker before you know it. So you want like a thin, either like a cardstock like Nina if you're making cards, or a thin marker paper. It will save you so much money in ink. So it is worth investing in that. I'm also going to add a little bit of shadow onto the edges of these because they're going to be white as well. Just little bits of water. We're not doing anything too wet here because we want to kind of have more of controlled work with our watercolor today.
Katrina Noel. I want to do art for my living. My parents say that the best way to do that is to know how to do art on the computer. What do you think about computer graphics?
It's certainly a good way to ensure that you can find work. You actually went to school for graphic design. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, because you're more.
Well, it depends on the area that you live in. It's going to depend on the demand. And honestly, if you're looking at a job in graphics, you're going to start on the bottom, which means you're going to get the the boring work, the business card, the updated menu, so we're at work, especially when you're first starting, you're not going to have all the artistic freedom you think you are. And you can be freelance, but as Lindsay can attest as a freelance artist, sometimes the money you make does not equal the amount of time or effort you put into something. it's not a bad idea, but if your passion is hands-on art like painting or other types, I would say you might want to stick with that. No, you're not going to get rich, but chances that you're going to get rich off graphic computer design
Hmm.
is small too. So,
Sometimes it's better to get it just to get a regular job that pays the bills,
right.
and then then paint your passion when you know, on your own time, and then you don't have to compromise. All right, so now I want to deepen up some of the shadows on this one. So I'm going to go right into that quinacridone rose. And I think that probably has a little burnt sienna and yellow in it, and that's fine. And I am just going to kind of go over, glaze over what I've already done. Just a little bit there on the edge, a little bit next to this first rib of the lantern. Just a little thin one in the middle. And I'm going on the outside of the rib on this side. Now I've got a little backwash there, so I'm going to tend to that right now, just by putting a dry brush in there and soaking it up. And then just do this last outline over here. And it just gives it a little bit more dimension because we're adding another transparent layer over what we have. And if you don't think your yellow is quite bright enough, you can go and add a little bit more of that as well.
Ian Jackson, do you have any advice on Derwent art bars?
I don't have those. I've thought about getting them. I think they're like kind of a waxy, kind of like watercolor crayon, but I've never used them. I thought they were being discontinued, so I guess I didn't want to get them and love them and then not be able to get them again. So no, if anybody's used them and wants to chime in, please do.
Rich is on.
Oh, hey,
Spin
Rich.
doctor, so he probably has
Something to say.
something to say.
I'm gonna make a nice dark. Again, I'm using that phthalo green and quinacridone rose. Make as dark as I can by using very little water. So I wiped off my brush, and then I went into the pot of quinacridone rose. And I'm just trying to go get a balance. So here I've got I'll move it so you can see it a little bit better. I'm getting a very purple mix there, so I need a little bit more, and it's very red based, and a little more of that green. And there I'm getting more of a neutral dark there. Okay, and that's the same color I used for my shadows, so this will be really good for putting in some little brush kind of stroke work bamboo on this lantern here. I'm just touching the other spots to make sure they're dry before I begin. And I'm going to start by making a nice line across there because that's what I see in my reference photo. And I'm going to start just dragging down some little bamboo leaves. Now I'm going to do the stem actually with a smaller brush if I can get a little bit wetter here. And I'm going to put some bamboo just going across this panel. And I have no training in Sumi-E. I'm just kind of faking it here, so.
Jane Wilkinson, can you tell me the difference between a wash and a glaze? Thank you for sharing everything you do. Love your channel.
Thanks. A wash is usually a glaze can be a wash, but a glaze is a transparent layer going over something else. So a wash could be right on plain paper. A glaze has to be going over something else. It's just like a veil of color. I'm just putting a few other little branches in here just so I have something to anchor some leaves to. And that's all I'm doing for that. So less is more. If you don't know what you're painting, less is more. Just suggest it, because if you start to try to get detailed and you don't know what you're doing, it can be really obvious. So I'm just flicking out little bamboo leaf shapes here. And as long as I don't get too carried away and just do, like, I'm just doing kind of groups of 3 little flicks, I'll be fine.
Faye Salkus, what are your thoughts about using a pantograph? A pantograph.
I've never used one. They're like they remind me of those old shaving mirrors, or got that kind of like you trace something with one side and there's a pencil attached to it. So when you draw it, it makes it bigger, like on a piece of paper.
Oh.
Yeah, I've actually never used one, but I think that tracing is a great way to learn to draw. So I don't think there'd be any harm in it, as long as you use it as a tool and not a crutch. I'm just outlining the ribs on this top of this, that's too dark. If you get a line that's too dark, just grab your paper towel, blot, and you can lighten it right up, so don't freak. That'll work out just fine.
Bronwyn Wallace, what colors can you mix to get a warm gray tone? I think you're incredible.
Oh, thank you. I like burnt sienna and ultramarine because I can make a variety of grays that way. I can do cool grays by adding more blue, and I could do warm grays by adding more burnt sienna. That's my favorite go-to gray mix because I tend to use those colors in a lot of paintings. And so for here, for my gray, I'm using what I have in my painting, which is quinacridone red and phthalo green. They're opposites on the color wheel, and when you mix opposites, you get brown or green. So that's why I'm doing that. But if I was using those other colors, I would use those greens. I'm sorry, those colors. And I'm just going in and adding just the little details from my sketch. And I don't want to do this fringe here yet because it's gonna be yellow and it'll wick into the black that I've done, so I don't want that to happen. And I can't see any sort of design on the caps of these, so I don't want to go in and do that yet. All right, so next we're gonna come over here and do a little detailing. Make sure it's dry. This time of year, things dry pretty quickly.
Not these last couple of days. It's been so stinking humid.
Well, yeah, it has been pretty humid.
Ugh. Alex Vintage, have you ever painted with Dollar and Rowney's simple watercolors? Do you think they are good for beginners?
I have a few tubes of Aquafine, and I kind of throw them in my paint box for the one that I take out teaching. So if somebody is out of a color, I can top it off, and it's okay. It's not as nice as like an artist quality paint, but it definitely paints fine, and it's going to get you through. So I haven't tried the Simply, but I'm thinking Rich said something about two different Dollar Rowney's being the same product, just different names for different markets. So
Well,
I'm
he's
wondering.
saying that he tried the Simply acrylics and that they don't mix well and have terrible pigment load.
Oh, then
He recommend, at least for acrylics, he recommends going up a tier and getting the Graduate or Aquafine.
okay, so Aquafine is what?
Yeah, or Georgian watercolors, aka Georgian watercolor.
Yeah, we got the Georgian oils in the States,
Hmm.
and those have been fine.
Elizabeth Kilbride, have you thought about doing a show about how to lay down watercolor, light to dark, etc.?
Doing a show on, I'm not sure. I try to put as much techniques into each thing as I can, so I'm not exactly sure what she's asking. I made some gray, some dull green gray, just by taking the yellow and the phthalo green and a little bit of burnt umber, just to kind of kick it back a notch. And I'm just going to put in what I can kind of make out from the detail of this photo. That's too much water on my brush. It looks like there's a bird and some just like pine needles, it almost looks like here. So I'm sorry, if you want to be more specific or put an example in the request list on my website, that would be helpful because I'm kind of drawing a blank. Picking up some burnt sienna on its own, putting a little branch over here. Now, you could decorate these little panels however you wanted. I'm just trying to mimic what I see in the reference photo um, as far as the little scenes on here. But you could put flowers, you could put whatever you want. And grab a little turquoise and paint that little bird. I'm seeing little birds in there. Cap of a bird there, and a little bird here. And you don't have to be fussy with it because you really can't see, you're not close enough to see any detail. And I'm going to grab a little bit of the quinacridone mix where we had a little burnt umber and a yellow in it, so it's kind of a little more orangey. I'm adding a little more yellow to that, and I'm going to dab on some flowers. All right, now I think we can actually go back to the fringe on that one. Well, no, that's still a little bit wet. I guess we gotta wait. We'll go over to this one. And on one of these panels is actually a geisha, but I think that's way too complicated to try to squeeze in. So I think I'm gonna do some characters here. I could see some characters there. I'm gonna try to approximate them as much as I can without worrying about having it absolutely perfect. Kind of like if you're trying to read a billboard from, you know, 2 streets over and you can't quite make over what it says. Kind of what I'm doing there. And I can do the fringe on that one because I don't have anything wet touching it. And I'm going to go in with a nice deep red. So again, the quinacridone rose, a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of permanent yellow.
Laura R. I got Daniel Smith 238 dot chart today. Any ideas for a usable project to try them all out?
I've been thinking about that too because
What is that?
well, I've got a dot chart. What do I do with it? Because
I feel like I recognize it, but I don't know what it is.
I think it's in that. I think I have. Yeah, I think it's right over here in the stack. I'll show you guys what it is. It's a sample of their paints. They just have a little dab of all the different colors. This is a 66 dot chart. But
cool.
I was thinking what I'm gonna do because I have to. I feel like
Ooh,
everything
look
has
at
to be
those
practical
pearl
with me.
colors.
I know.
Mm.
So I thought what I would do is actually maybe just cut a bunch of watercolor paper down to bookmark size or artist trading card size.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and just maybe kind of play with some backgrounds, and that way I can make artist trading cards out of them or bookmarks out of them, so I don't feel like I've just wasted paper and paint. And then I can really see kind of how it looks and if it's a tube that I'd want to invest in. Because their paints are expensive, so it's nice to kind of try before you buy a whole tube.
Elizabeth Kilbride. Clarification. Acrylic. Whoop, hang on. Jumped up. Chat jumped up.
It does that. They get all chatty and then you can't keep up with them.
Everyone's chatty today.
Chatty cat.
Acrylic is dark to light. Watercolor is light to dark. Many have asked me, how do you watercolor without making everything dark when it should be light?
Oh, well, you know, I actually usually begin by putting my darks in first, so I have that established value. I don't usually work light to dark. So I'm trying to think how, because I feel like I discussed that in every painting a little bit, like how I approach different things, like we're approaching working on a white background today. So let me think on that because think of a way to make it into something that would be helpful and help people learn. It would help if you put it in the request, pardon me, the request section too.
Dominique Designs. Lindsay, I've made a bunch of the paper boxes and love them.
Oh, fun. Those are so fun. They're so great for organizing. My junk drawer is full of them.
Junk drawer.
Yeah, I use them to like put paper clips in and erasers, and you can make your fringe kind of swing a little bit if you want to have a little more movement. Just kind of flick them out with your credit card scraper. Just flick out the fringe to the side a little bit.
Who doesn't like a little flicky fringe?
I know. Gotta have a flicky fringe.
I have no fringe on today.
Me either. I'm gonna skip over to this one though and try that yellow fringe. Froggy today. All right, and this is a pretty bright yellow, so I'm not going to mix it with anything. Just tap off your brush on your palette a little bit. I'll show you here what I mean. Because sometimes if you go right from the color, you can end up with a gob, and you don't want to have a gob. You just want to kind of tap it out a little bit. Make sure that you have a very consistent paint there. And we're going to go in and add the yellow fringe to this guy over here.
Julie, you look so defeated.
I like to kind of make a dotty line at the bottom just to kind of even up my fringe a little bit. It helps me so it doesn't look really unruly and tattered. And again, I'm going to do the bottom here, just kind of dot along. And then credit card scraper to add some detail.
Yes, Lila. Just looking, just watching.
Yeah. I feel like I'll take a little bit of that yellow and maybe add some more to this lantern here just to help. And this is glazing because we're adding a transparent veil over something previous. It can help unify things because you kind of give the whole treatment over something, so it just kind of like you're putting a film over the entire thing, and it makes it all look like it matches. That makes sense. I'm also going to do yellow over here, and I'm doing it, you know, pretty much straight from the cake again, just tapping it out to make sure I don't have too much on my brush. And the same exact thing right here.
Jody Vest. I have Canson XL watercolor paper, but it keeps flaking. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that paper cannot take a lot of lifting, so that's really great for plein air work, or if you're a stamper and you stamp in watercolor, because it's a really smooth texture as well. So that's what I use it mostly for. Is I use it for, this is Canson XL here, but I swatched my colors out. I really like it because it's good for stamping. It's nice and smooth. And then I'll use it for, like, if I'll make postcards. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm so froggy today. I'll make postcards and paint on them out in the field, because I don't tend to lift paint when I'm on the field. I'm working so quick. You just have to be careful not to overwork that paper. I think hot press paper can tend to pill a little bit more too. I've noticed that in Fabriano as well. So just work quickly and don't try to go back in and overwork.
Lie by. All right, Lindsay, tell the truth. Are you a hoarder?
Am I a hoarder?
No, I don't think you are.
I'm an enthusiastic collector.
Yes, you are an enthusiastic collector. Although we were having discussions today about you going through and
Yep.
weeding some things out, so that's good.
Yep. Now, I don't know. I do have a hard time getting rid of craft supplies, just because I teach classes for kids, and I do it at the library, so I don't really have a budget for supplies. So I kind of, you know, use my excess there a lot. And I mean, I probably could ask the library for a supply budget, but I'd rather just try to help, you know, help as many kids as possible.
Yeah.
And it helps me use up my stuff too. I do have a hard time getting rid of art supplies though, because I see the potential in them. I have no problem getting rid of excess dishes or excess clothing or anything like that, because if I'm not going to use it, if I'm not going to wear it, I'll get rid of it. But I find that I'll put stuff in the box thinking, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this, and it won't be a week before I'm pilfering through the box to find something that I stuck in there. So I don't think I'm a hoarder because I use it, but you know, other people might have a different opinion.
I don't think you're a hoarder. I love it because I don't need to go to the stores anymore. I just come down to Lindsay's craft room and borrow a few things if I'm looking if I have an itch for something new.
That's right. I want to show you guys a couple different types of brushes here. Riggers. And sometimes these are called liners, but basically the job of these brushes, because they have long bristles, is to hold a lot of paint and to give you long lines. So what I'm going to do is show you how to use both of these brushes to achieve a nice, like, long, like where you've got these lines that the lanterns are on. They're called riggers because they use them to paint the riggings on boats. So we're going to mix up some nice dark gray with our phthalo green and our quinacridone rose again. And you want a nice juicy puddle, because the brush is going to hold quite a bit. And these are synthetic ones. They're not even natural hair ones, and they still do a great job at holding lots of paint. So I don't know if you can see my puddle there. I'm just mixing up the phthalo and the quinacridone, getting a nice gray. And balancing those two colors, that's a really great exercise as far as mixing, because it can be hard to make a gray and just learn how to balance color. So I highly recommend you try that. Try looking at a color wheel, picking colors opposite each other. You'll notice some colors will give you brown, like purple and yellow. Those will almost always give you brown. Whereas like a really transparent red and like a phthalo green will always give you like a black or gray. So you can see now look how sharp those bristles are. They're like a razor. They're just sharp as a knife. So I'm going to turn my paper so that I'm at a more comfortable angle. And you want to do this on a time when you're feeling very steady.
Not after 4 cups of coffee.
Right. And see, you can get a really nice fine line. And this line's going to be thicker than the line that we get with a liner. And you could work up on the tip and get even a finer line. I try to use my whole arm movement when I do this. So if you can stand up and do that, it's really helpful. Helps you get a smoother look. I ended up changing where that goes, so I'm gonna have to erase that later, I guess.
Whoops.
That's all right.
It happens.
It happens. So then with a liner, same idea. Got our liner here. I generally don't mix my color with a liner, but I think because there's such a soft bristle, I do need a little bit more. So see, once you get used to balancing color, it happens so easily. And then I'm going to use this to, whoops, I just see, you got to be careful. I just put my wrist in there. I'm going to turn my whole painting around, so I'm not going to lay my hand in my wet paint. And so that's what I was figuring. I would do a background if I got something on the background that I needed to disguise. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a knot there just by tapping my brush. And you could even like use a ruler and maybe even hold the ruler up a little bit so you're kind of guiding your arm against the ruler. If you have a hard time getting a straight line, I don't worry about it too much. I like the organic look of wobbly lines or even broken lines.
In real life, they wouldn't be perfectly straight.
Exactly. If that's bugging me though, I think I do need to add another little swoop of, there we go. And there we go. And so now I feel like some of these lanterns are looking a little flat. So what I want to do is add a little shading, and I think I'm going to use a small angular brush for that, or a small flat. You can use either. Oh, let me see. I should have weeded through these. I was looking through my brushes the other day, and I had quite a few. I'll choose a small flat.
You have a few brushes. Lindsay.
I know. I think this brush is too small actually for what I want to do, so I got to get a wider one. That's just a small aqualine. I like the aqualines as well, because if you forget them in the water overnight, like I am one to do, you can they don't the paint, like this is a wooden handled brush. These are wonderful brushes, but the handle will chip if they are left overnight in the water. So I'm going to use a brush that's wider than the area I want to paint because I need some width there to work. Now, if you have an angular brush, it's even better because you can always know where you're putting your paint, but I'm putting paint right on the edge. So if you got an angle brush, do it on the long edge. And I'm just going to put some of that phthalo green there. You can't really see it on there because the watercolor is transparent, but I'm going to go and give myself a side load shadow. Okay, see that? It just gives you a very, very gradual shadow there. And I'm going to do that down there, down there. And as long as I haven't covered the whole brush, I can keep doing that. If I see that I'm getting a solid bar of color, then I need to wash my brush and reload. Now, I have to be careful because I really want to make sure that it's not going to go too far because I'll be off of the edge of the paper. Yeah, I feel like I need to wash it. Paint's going too far there, so just rinse it off in your water, blot it, make sure that you don't have any, whoops, I just dropped an entire
All right.
splash of water there. Dry it off, kind of like I like to squeeze it with my fingers.
There's
just
another
to
drop on the bottom there, I think, of the brush.
Oh, a bead. The bead, the dreaded bead. The dreaded bead.
Janine Elise Pike. Hi, I watched your Daniel Smith watercolor. I really enjoyed it. What is your opinion on the core versus Daniel Smith? I know they use different binders.
The big difference between the core and Daniel Smith is the translucency of the paint. The core paints are much more translucent. They don't have the graininess. So it depends on what you want. Sometimes I want a paint that really granulates, and Daniel Smith has a lot of really nice granulating colors. The core paints are just more sheer. Quality wise, I mean, cores haven't been around that long, so it's kind of hard to say what's gonna not fade in the long run. There are light fastness tests on most of the core colors, but not all of them. So just be aware when you're shopping, of the light fast if that's important to you. But I just think it's kind of apples to oranges. They're different paints and they have different qualities. So if you want more of a sheer transparent color, use a tube of core. If you want like a granulating color, look at their chart and choose they have a really good website. You don't really have to order a chart to see what's going to granulate and what isn't, and kind of build your palette that way. And the on their chart, they tell you if things are granulating, if they're staining, how transparent they are. So just use that information. But I mean, I like them both. And if you buy the core, I recommend getting the cores and the starter kits because they seem to be a lot cheaper. And you get a cute little tin that you can use as a palette. Not that I'm obsessed with the way things are packaged and it makes me buy things or not, but it comes in a really cool package.
Look up, down, Ani. Lindsay, have you used the polypropylene paper for watercolors?
Yes, I have. I don't use it that often though. I do have quite a bit of it. The Yupo. It's fun. I honestly, I think what it is I like to use that really big. I don't like to use that like when I'm doing tutorials, I'm doing smaller work. Um, and when I do Yupo, I want to like use a full sheet of it, and it has to sit out for hours in between layers to dry because it just takes so long.
Chewy is
But I like it.
right behind
Yeah,
you,
I
just so you
oh
know.
yeah, her ear is
Yeah.
like an inch from my foot. Chewy.
Well, you know.
I'm gonna do a little burnt umber with the yellow because I need some shadow for the fringe. So I'm just adding little touches of it until I get something that's gonna show up against the fringe that I've put. And I'm using a fairly small brush. You could even go with a liner if you wanted to. This is a number 4 Ebony Splendor. I have a pretty steady hand, so I can use a brush that's a little bit larger than what you might want, but I just want to flick in a little bit of shadows. I'm not a tiny brush person. I was watching there's an artist, Anna Mason. She's a really talented watercolorist, and she's a craftsy class. And she's got these very realistic paintings, and she uses these tiny little brushes. I'm like, oh, I would not last. That is gorgeous. It is not for me.
Gracie Shack, did you see my photographs of flowers? I'm assuming she means on paint my photo. You can use them for tutorial ideas if you wish.
Well, thank you. I haven't seen them yet, but I'll have to go looking for them. There was I've noticed that like YouTube comments and stuff have been very strange lately. Things have been getting lost or thrown to spam that shouldn't be there.
Really?
Yeah, it's been very unreliable. I mean, I think it's just every once in a while there'll be a YouTube glitch and it just like affects weird areas of YouTube. Okay, so now I didn't do any of the details on this, so I'm going to grab some of that dark color, and you can use either your liner or a smaller brush, whatever you want, and we're going to make sure there's no beads of water on your brush because that will drip down and leave a big splat where you don't want it. And I am just going to very gently put in some of the detail here. I did a broken line on the edge because I didn't want it to look like a cartoon. Try to work.
Joe Maskey.
Yep.
Lindsay, can we start a Brush Buyers Anonymous Club?
Seriously. We'll meet every Thursday at the art store.
Coupons in hand.
Coupons in hand. Use your brush when you're trying to get a fine line. Use your brush straight up and down, and then you can work right on the tip of it.
All right, Chewy.
She wants to go play with the chickens.
Yeah, which means chase them and eat their poop.
Gross. The yard is so clean after Chewy's been over. Now after I have these dark lines in, I can see, yeah, it needs a little shading or it needs this or that, but you kind of have to get that in before you realize what it needs. Now I apparently put this complete extra piece here on this lantern, so I'm going to reconstruct it a little bit. I'm going to make it act like it was supposed to be there. Maybe I was looking at a different one when I sketched it out.
We have someone, I don't know what their name is. It's in a foreign language.
Okay.
Asks, do you recommend solid or tube watercolors? And do you have a video about it?
Honestly, it's personal preference. If it's a quality brand, it doesn't matter if you buy them in the pans or tubes. Usually when I buy a palette, like a travel kit, they come in pans. And when I go to buy like an individual color in our country, it's more common to find them in tubes. So that's kind of usually how I acquire them. If I'm like ordering online from Jerry's, I want to get some paint, I'm gonna get a tube. basically. But if I'm going to buy a set of paints, a lot of times they'll come in pans. Personally, I like to paint from pans or tube paint that's been dried in my palette. So it's completely up to you. If you do a lot of larger work, a lot of backgrounds, you probably want to work sometimes straight from the tube so that you can mix up like a little big pot of color and, you know, paint something in one go. If you're working on smaller things like this or you're traveling, you're going to want the pans because it's much more convenient. I'm going to go in and add little bits of shadow here. Actually, I'm going to skip over to this one for a second. I didn't put the dark bars in there, and that will give me time there for that to dry. I'm doing the same thing over here as I was before. So yeah, it's personal preference. As long as it's a quality brand of paint, it does not matter if you buy them in pans or tubes. The only difference I've noticed, actually, the brand Winsor Newton, um, because I like to let the paint dry in the palette, and if I have leftover paint, I just leave it there and use it next time. I have noticed, and they recommend that you do not let their paint dry and reuse it, and I thought it was kind of a load of crap. But then I have noticed with their paints in particular, it seems like they do not re-wet as well if I do that. But their pans are beautiful, so they must use a different formulation, like maybe more, not as much gum arabic in their tube colors or something. So that's the only place where I've noticed that that you might have trouble. Or if you're using student grade paints and they come in a tube, they will crack in your palette unless you add honey or gum arabic to them. So those are a couple notable exceptions. But if you're doing artist quality paint, generally it doesn't really matter. It's whatever you prefer.
Janine Elise Pike. Could I use the Daniel Smith and Core together even though they are different binders?
Oh yeah, I've used the core with other brands together and never had an issue. It's, I mean, the absorption of the paper also grabs that paint. So yeah, I've never had any issues using those together.
Ian Jackson, are there any traditional Japanese paint you would use for this painting?
Well, Turners are Japanese paints, but they're very transparent, more like an Eastern painting. You could use a Ganzi Tambais. You could really use anything. Generally a Western. I'm sorry. These are Japanese made paints, but they're very Western feeling. They're very transparent. Here's the swatch that I made. You know, they're very clean colors, with the exception of the Mayan colors. They're very nice and clean. Whereas Eastern colors are a little more chalky and a little more opaque because they're meant for working on like rice paper, less absorbed, like more so confused. More absorbent paper. They're thicker, chalkier, more opaque. Like the Kiritaki Gansai Tambes, they end up being a little more opaque. And you could use either one. It's just personal preference. I like the transparent layers, so that's why I'm using these. And I thought it was funny because even though these are made in Japan, they don't feel like like an Eastern watercolor. Neither do Mission Golds, which are made in Korea. But you could use either one. I think it's gonna be pretty either way. You'll probably get more of a Japanese look if you used like a sumi e paint or ink versus a watercolor, a traditional watercolor. All right, now I want to add some shadows to this, and I'm going over to this quinacridone mix here. Um, I want to be fairly transparent, so I'm just kind of adding a little water to this. I'm not going to put any more burnt sienna or yellow in there. I just want this kind of softer pink here. And I'm just going to add little drops, and then I'm going to spread it out with my damp brush.
Lie by, what palette do you like for outdoor painting?
I have quite a few, but the one I use the most is the Koi travel kit, and it's a set of 24 colors. It comes in like 3 different sizes. But I like it. So it has a little water brush. The colors, the paints aren't as nice as these or like the other stuff I use in the studio, but I tend not to mix as much when I'm painting out because, you know, I'm trying to paint so quick I can't take, you know, an extra minute to mix up a perfect gray. I need to, you know, get it done and move on because I'm usually out with my kids and, you know, they'll get impatient or I gotta get up and, you know, follow them wherever they're going. But I really like that. It's very, very portable, and I'll refill it with artist quality paints once I use it up. But it's also very slow wearing. I've been using it for years, and it still has lots of paint in it. And that's where I do all the little postcard sketches that you see on my Instagram. Those are all done with that set. Basically, just adding a little bit of shadow next to the ribs on the lanterns underneath the area where it would be casting a little shadow, and you know, just kind of helping it feel a little more round. And this actually lantern's really faded in the picture, so I'm kind of faking it a little bit and adding a little bit more. Oh, way too much water. I think I will leave this on the white background. I think I'm liking the white background.
Yeah, the colors are really poppy.
Yeah, I
Poppy.
think so. Puppies. I want a little shadow on the red. I think I'm going to do the quinacridone red, whoops, and the burnt umber. Got a lot of movement upstairs.
Benny Chavez. Lindsay, I ordered the 36 color Mission Gold set and I am in love with them. You really should consider picking it up. Evil grin. Look at Benny, you're a pusher. You're an art pusher.
He is, and he was just the one suggesting the support group. Where are we going to meet there? At an internet cafe with our Amazon computers, or computers on Amazon?
Your Jerry's Artorama coupons,
catalogs.
Ready to go?
Oh, man. I was considering that. I got the pure pigment set, and I really like it. But I'm like, oh, I'll get the pure pigment set, and I won't want the 36 set, because 36 set's a lot of mixes, so I'll just get the pure pigments, and then I won't have any want for any more of those. All right, so I'm just evaluating now, trying to decide if I want to add anything else to this. If you guys want to chime in and let me know what you think, if I should leave it like this or throw a background in, or what. I am unsure. I think I'm liking it just plain like this.
Put some splatters on there.
You know, I don't even really feel the need. But you
know
what?
I only said that because
actually,
Rich is on today.
You know what I could do? I'm kind of thinking about wetting a few little areas and then maybe flicking in some of that mixed gray. I think that might be kind of pretty. What do you think?
I say do it.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
You know, I'm down.
I'm very suggestible. So I am switching over to a natural hair soft brush, and I'm just gonna kind of loosely throw in some water, because I'm not going to do a very specific background, because I've got these wires and I've got the little details on some of these lanterns, so I really don't want to try to paint around anything, because that's why I usually do my backgrounds first, because I don't like to try to paint around things. Luckily, the gray I made was with phthalo blue and quinacridone rose, and phthalo blue is a very staining color, so it shouldn't lift up too much. But we might get that pretty separation where you see where you'll see some green staining, then you'll see some pink on its own as the colors kind of flip apart, kind of separate. So again, since this is going to look kind of wild and crazy, I am totally controlling where my paint's going to go, because I'm only wetting the areas where I want paint. And I'm going to mix up more of that color. I'll let some brown get in the action too there. I think you can see right down there in the corner of my screen, that's where I'm mixing it there. It's on screen, but it's kind of hidden over a little bit. All right, and then I think, what do I want to do? I don't feel like that's wet enough. A little more water in there.
Where are all these nasty people coming from? I've just had to block 2 people from gross,
inappropriate
comments. Actually, me and Valerie just blocked the same guy.
Oh, good, Valerie's here. She's a good moderator.
Yeah, she got a couple other people, but man.
All right, so I'm just throwing in some background color. It's a little green heavy. I'm gonna add a little more of the quinacridone to it. There, we're getting this more neutral gray there. And this could be like clouds, maybe even. And this will be something loose to contrast our more detailed, tight drawing that we've done so far. And I think that contrast is important to make a painting interesting. I think that's why I like to do spatters sometimes, because I feel like there's been too much control in the picture, and it needs something a little bit out of control. The diagonal design kind of pulls your eye through the picture. Actually, the reference photo has a beautiful weathered brick wall behind the lanterns. Highly recommend checking that out. Any other questions floating through?
No, people are talking about trolls because we just had to ban like 4 people in a row.
Oh my gosh.
Me and Valor, there's gross.
It's all the people that are used to like trolling the like conventions, like the political conventions maybe, and they're bored
No,
today.
these were sexual in nature.
Ew,
Yeah,
gross.
exactly. Gross. That is not nice art talk.
Can't say something nice. Can't be part of the group.
That's right. This is a positive place. No gross talk. Marit Hansen, question about watercolor paper. What kind of paper should I use? Who like to lift color from paper? I tend to destroy paper.
Arches is really good. It has a good control, but it's also really good to lift off of. I find that Canson Montville is also really good. It has a lot of sizing in it for lifting. So basically you want a long fibered paper with a lot of sizing to achieve good lifts. And those two work pretty well. Most artist grade papers will allow you to lift fairly well on them.
Valerie, she is a regular here at the Frugal Crafter, fairly regular.
Yep, she's a moderator.
She also is a moderator, so if someone comes in and starts being inappropriate, she has the ability to block them. Because sometimes I get behind on chat if it's really busy and there's a lot of questions.
I'm adding some turquoise to this gray mix. I feel like I want to blue it up a little bit. Some splattering in there. Control it a little bit by putting my hands over where I don't want it to flick too much. Can put some big drops totally directed where I want them by just kind of loading up that brush and just setting it.
The Spin Doctor does say he's got spatters in the video he's uploading tonight.
Oh, nice.
Dominique Designs. I had the idea of using the paper boxes as wedding gifts with something special inside.
Oh, nice.
I hadn't seen that video. That must be on your channel.
Yeah, it was it was on my blog last week and my channel last week. It's origami boxes.
Oh.
Yeah, and we do like an undersea theme. They were fun. But they're really great for like gifts and making just quick little storage. I store my little tiny alphabet stamps in them. Yeah, I like this background. I felt like it just looked a little too stark.
Ian Jackson, how about a primary color only watercolor painting?
I like the sound of that.
Valerie Connell, Lindsay, will you be my mod when I go live?
Sure, if I'm available.
Joe Maskey, Lindsay, did you say Fabriano was sized differently than other top-end brands?
Fabriano does not use gelatin as a sizing. I'm not sure what they use, so it's a completely vegan paper. This is a Fabriano paper that I'm working on here. I don't find it lifts as well as other brands, though. That's the thing, though. If you're looking for something that lifts, I think that the gelatin is kind of the key to that.
All right.
And also, if you add gum arabic into your paint, it will lift easier.
I've added Dominique and the Spin Doctor as moderators. They both offer.
Good. Because
that'll help cover us every week more.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have good selection, so.
Oh yeah, and if I decide to do an impromptu live, that would be.
Oh, Dominique has a wrench. She's excited to have the wrench.
That's right. You get a wrench if you're a moderator.
You do. Well, just sometimes when there's a lot of questions and a lot of chat, I just get behind, so I don't always see the nasty people that come in and try to disrupt things.
Well, on the upside, it must mean that we're being promoted on the hashtag live channel or something.
Yes.
YouTube's live channel. So I mean, that's a good thing.
With every good comes a little bit of bad.
Yep. Well, sorry you guys had to see that. I mean, ugh.
It's okay. Between Valerie and I, we squashed it fast.
Good. So sad that somebody's like highlighted their day.
I've got like 1,000 other things I can think I'd rather do than get on the internet and troll people.
Yep.
The Spin Doctor, gelatin sizing is alum plus buffer plus protein. Any protein can be used, so vegan ones probably use a plant protein. Oh.
Hmm. Interesting. All right, I'm really interested to see what these colors are going to do as they dry in the background, see if I'll get much separation and see
Yeah, it's a great background color.
many of the colors. You know, it's kind of like when there's a calligraphy pen called Elegant Writer, and an artist, Carolyn Hamilton, I think is her name. Carolyn, shoot, I can't remember her name, but she does these beautiful sketches, and then she wets areas, and you get these really pretty blooms of color. And she does it all with the Elegant Writer, and you see greens and pinks. So I'm wondering if it's a very similar ink mix. So
Sharon Avalon.
Mhm.
Will adding gum Arabic help lift colors that are dye based?
Yeah, it'll help. It'll help anything. Dye-based colors do tend to stain, but it will help. I just wanted to see what this is going to be like when it dried, and maybe see if I need to add any more punches of color now that I have this background in, because the background does change the how everything else looks.
But I'm partial to gray. I like gray quite a bit.
It does let other colors set off nicely against it.
Leslie Gladney, do you have a paper you default to, or does it depend on the project?
It really depends on the project. I like arches the most, but it's also very expensive. I'm not going to use arches to test out my watercolors. I like to use, I'll use a less expensive brand for that. But that's a great, if you could only have, because sometimes if you buy like a bulk pack of paper, you can get it for less than what you would buy, a few smaller packs, different brands for. Um, so that's a really good one, but it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm making a card, I don't want something as rough as arches, and I will use Canson XL, or I will use Fabriano Studio. If I'm painting, painting in the field, I don't care if the paper has that much sizing in it, because I'm just painting quick and I'm not lifting. I'm just I could use sketch paper for that, for all intents and purposes on that. I like Strathmore 400 blocks because they're way cheaper than arches, and they're easy to find, and I can use a coupon on them at a big box store. Or Montville, they lift really well. They're not going to absorb as well, so they're going to have more of a runny look to them. It really just depends. I really, I think as long as you get a decent paper, it's more about your skill than it is about the supplies you're using. So yeah, it definitely depends on the project. I kind of save my arches, even though I have quite a bit of it for the good, for stuff I'm going to work a long time on, not like a quick demonstration. I'm just hitting this with some more bright colors because I feel like I just need to get this more pop of a color. So I'm going in, like here, anything where I have the red, I'm actually just going in with the pure quinacridone red, because I want that glaze to really pop and make it really stand out. So we've worked with quite a few little glazes here today. We're just about done. This is a longer one than usual. Hope nobody had anything to do. How many people do we have?
Right now, 239. We've been
Nice.
hovering around 250 to 260,
Nice.
depending on how many trolls we've had to kick out today.
Oh my gosh.
Kevin Crespo, besides M. Graham Watercolors, what other watercolor brand do you like to use?
Unfortunately, I like a lot of them. I really like, and again, it depends on on what I'm working on, but I like the Daniel Smith. I just have 6 colors, but I really like those. And I intend on getting some more that granulate a little bit better. I love the Mission Gold Pure Pigments that I just got, and I'm hoping that they're as light fast as they claim and they don't fade. I even like Cotmans. I teach with Cotmans a lot because I find that it's a very reliable paint and easy for people to find. And I know you know what you're getting, and it's not crazy expensive. Those are Common by Winsor Newton. They're the student line, and I usually get those in pans. I'm adding a little bit of blue to this. This feels just too, and that's a turquoise. This feels like too dull to me with that gray background. So I'm just giving a little punch of turquoise. Careful not to kick up what you've already painted there, though. Just kind of lay an easy glaze on top. And let some white sparkle show. I'm keeping some white on the edges just so I got that sparkle. And I'm going to do the same thing up here to the lid on this. Oh, okay. I like this now. I think it needed that background. I think it needed that little bit of pop of color there. All right. I think this is. Oh, you know what? One more thing I want to do. If I knew I was going to do a background before, I wouldn't have put I wouldn't have put my lines in yet. Now they're kind of washy. So I am going to just flip this around and reinforce my lines. Just give them a little some sharp spots here and there. I'm not going to outline every little bit because I might get a little too thick, but I want to reinforce some of them. So if you have any last minute questions, go ahead and type them in all caps so Sarah can ask me.
Chatty, but no questions so
Oh,
far.
that's
I think everybody
okay.
got all their questions answered today.
Well, you know, I think you keep coming to these. A lot of the questions get asked a lot over and over
Yes.
again, so you know they kind of already know.
Yep.
All right, so there you go. I'm just going to sign my name with probably the same dark gray, and we'll be done. Got any big plans for the weekend, Sarah?
What do I have planned this weekend? Nothing. A whole lot. No, I don't know. I'm sure something will come up. Tammy Kenyon. When I layer colors or shading, it tends to look muddy. How do I avoid that?
Well, I'd be curious to know what paint she's using.
Okay.
Because sometimes when you layer like the student grade paints, if they have a lot of fillers, they can become muddy when you layer them. It could be you've overmixed them before you've even layered them down, and it could also be your paper is more absorbent and sucking in the paint and not kind of letting the paint lay on top of the surface and give you those pretty veils of color. So I would investigate those three things and see what the culprit is. Maybe try a couple different types of paper. If you have other paint, try other paint. Try using the paints on their own unmixed, and I'm sure you'll figure out the issue that you're having.
Okay. That's it. We're all caught up.
All right, wonderful. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please check out our sponsor, Jerry's Artorama, if you're in need of art supplies. And if you would like a more in-depth class, check out my class on Craftsy. It's also linked in the video description. On my website, on my blog today, I have the pattern here for this, and I also have links to a couple other classes that I think you might enjoy from our friends at Craftsy. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Till next time, happy crafting!